What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. Lots going on this weekend, but there's only one place to start. That is Wembley Stadium and Crystal Palace's FA Cup triumph. Go back to the beginning of the season for a second. If you would have told a Premier League fan that we would have a team, which we do, we'll get to them a little bit later, who finished outside the top 8 last season, that's the Big Six plus Aston Villa and Newcastle, that were going to be in the Champions League top 4, top 5 conversation until the very end of the season, looking like a legitimate Champions League contender. I would argue at least a majority, if not a vast majority of people, would have said Crystal Palace is that team. They have that disastrous start to the season, which basically takes away any opportunity of that happening. By winning this game and doing what they did in the FA Cup and winning their first major trophy in club history, Oliver Glasner not only delivered on the lofty expectations this team had earned from what they did at the end of last season heading into this season, right? Because if you take out the circumstances and how they got there, they're playing in Europe next season, and they did something historic. Now, I thought that might be their best finish in a Premier League season in club history. Instead, it ended up being the first trophy. But if you take away the details, he did pretty much everything you could hope for outside of getting to the Champions League. But you can have a conversation whether that was actually ever realistic or not. There was a reason to be optimistic about their chances of playing in Europe and qualifying for Europe this season. And that's exactly what they did. And on top of it, by doing it through the Cup, you get the satisfaction of beating Manchester City to do it, and that one day, that one moment that those fans and those players will remember forever. I will always argue winning a cup like this means more than finishing fourth and qualifying for the Champions League. That is just how I feel, and this season to me is all the proof I need in that. Look at what it meant to Newcastle. Look at what it meant to Crystal Palace. It is a terrific thing for the Premier League that these are the kind of teams that are winning these cup competitions, that everybody goes in feeling like, well, we might just have a chance if things break our way. Because whether it's Bournemouth, whether it's Crystal Palace, whether it's Brighton, Brentford, you can go down the list, Fulham, on their day, they are more than capable of playing with the best teams in this league. And so you get these really, really special moments. You saw what it meant to those fans. They were in tears. They almost couldn't comprehend what was happening. That's what this sport is all about. That's what these cup competitions are all about. And Palace took a weird, roundabout, unexpected way to get there. But in the end, they basically did what everybody thought they were capable of, and obviously what their fans and that club hoped they would do this season. It's just not the way anybody expected them to get there. But they got there nonetheless, and they did it in a more special, meaningful fashion. The game itself. Give credit to that back five. The center backs were fantastic. Munoz, Mitchell, all over the place. Obviously, Munoz gets involved in the goal. Then he scores one himself that gets not wiped off for offside. They were sensational. They limited the danger. Of course, Manchester City are going to have opportunities. Of course, they're going to have a lot of the possession. That was how this game was going to go, especially in a cup final. Crystal Palace are not going to come out and try and beat Manchester City playing Manchester City's way with a trophy on the line. But they were in control and they were comfortable for most of that game. Yes, you have some moments that need to be acknowledged here. Was that a red card for Dean Henderson? Probably. However, I would argue of the two big VAR situations, the handball outside the box and the Bernardo Silva's penalty inside the box, the one that was a more clear and obvious error was Bernardo Silva's dive. I believe it was Tyreek Mitchell who was the defender. He threw his legs out there, just kind of flopped on top of him. To me, that one was more clear than the red card. Sure, there's absolutely a case that was a red. And this goes, again, I'm not going to get back into this conversation, but of what is the bar? Is it more than 50% a red card? I would go that far. Is that a clear and obvious error? I'm not so sure. They were covering defenders. I don't necessarily buy the direction of the ball argument that seemed to be why it wasn't a red. But it was not a clear cut, oh, okay. If he doesn't make that play, Erling Haaland is scoring a goal, no questions asked. Probably should have been a yellow. Maybe it should have been a red. But it's the same story of what is clear and obvious mean. So I'm not losing sleep over that. Sure, you need to catch some breaks along the way to win a competition like this. Today was Crystal Palace's day. There's no question about that. You got the penalty situation. Haaland should have taken it. Not exactly sure what happened there. But again, sometimes things just go your way. That's what happened for Crystal Palace in this game. The other thing I want to mention real quickly before we move on to other things. I don't want to hear this complaining from Manchester City. It was Ruben Diaz against Southampton about how they didn't even try to play. Pep Guardiola was very passive-aggressive after this game of congratulations to Crystal Palace, and that's just how they're going to play, and we had all these chances, but we didn't score a goal, so we didn't deserve to win. He essentially said we were the better team and they were just lucky. He was just trying to be diplomatic about it. When you are Manchester City and you are spending that much money on your team, I feel the same way about Inter Miami, LAFC, Real Madrid. You have an obligation to play in a certain fashion and to take the initiative and to control the game. That is part of being a big club and earning that reputation. Nobody else has an obligation to play when they're playing you. Their job is to try and win. You win because you have better players and you have more money to go get those players. They cannot just match you and expect that that is the best formula for success. And that is what the job of a manager is to do. Is to set your team up with the best chance to win and have success. And to me, almost by definition, if you are setting up in a fashion that is not intending to dominate the game, you are saying you are the inferior team and you are the inferior club. Crystal Palace have no problem acknowledging that when they're playing Manchester City. That's the reality of this situation. Teams have no obligation to come out and play against Manchester City. It is your job as Manchester City to go break them down and find a way to score a goal. Because at the end of the day, they can have all the chances they want. Pep Guardiola is right. They didn't score a goal. And outside of the penalty, there weren't all that many chances where they became super close to scoring. I feel like Crystal Palace were pretty comfortable. No, they didn't have the better of the play. But to me, again, it goes back to those defenders. They did a great job minimizing the danger, I felt like. And they earned this win. I will not take anything away from them. And I have no time for Manchester City complaining about the way other teams play. A couple other notable developments in the Premier League this weekend. A couple emotional and ultimately successful goodbyes. Jamie Vardy plays his last game for Leicester City. He scores his 200th goal in his 500th and final appearance for the club because, of course, he did. Because that's Jamie Vardy in a nutshell. He gets the goal in the first half. Leicester get a morale-boosting win. And Everton also send Goodison Park off in good fashion, getting a comfortable win over Southampton. So, two successful ends of really, really iconic, meaningful parts of club history here. Obviously, Vardy is, to me, the closest thing the Premier League has to a club legend. He's not the best player of all time or anything like that. But from the definition of the word legend, he's as close as it gets. And Everton, obviously, Goodison is a staple in this league, a staple in in England, and so they get to say goodbye to that famous stadium with a win as well. Outside of Newcastle, the team still battling for that Champions League spot took advantage and put the pressure on each other, setting up a phenomenal end to the season here. You have 5 teams currently separated as I record this by 1 point. Now, Manchester City still have to play that extra game, so that could change depending on what happens midweek. But this is going to be some kind of finale here next weekend. The fact that Nottingham Forest are playing Chelsea adds a lot of drama, but also the fact that that game in and of itself doesn't actually determine anything because of all of the different movement that can happen is, from a neutral standpoint, all you can ask for. So we're gonna have a lot of fun here seeing which of these 5 teams end up joining Arsenal and Liverpool in the Champions League. Last thing to mention here, and all of the excitement about the FA Cup and the drama of the end of the Premier League season, the goodbyes and kind of historic moments we had this weekend with Vardy and with Goodison Park, something happened in the Eredivisie that needs to be discussed. Ajax collapsed in historic fashion. I was reading that basically this has never happened before in the history of European leagues, if I'm understanding the article I read correctly. Ajax beat PSV to open up a 9-point lead. That 9-point lead was there with 5 games left in the season. Ajax then, in a 4-game stretch, dropped 10 points, 2 losses, 2 draws, to hand control of the league over to PSV heading into the final game of the season on Sunday. PSV then at one point conceded an equalizer where Ajax, maybe, just maybe, were going to actually retake this trophy that they had thrown away. And then PSV scored 2 goals in the second half, somewhat late on, to grab a 3-1 win and see it through. And so Ajax are now left wondering what in the world just happened. And this is now 3 seasons in a row. Ajax have not won the Eredivisie, which is not all that unprecedented. Interestingly, they win about 3 or 4 in a row, and then they have a stretch where they don't win one. So this is kind of staying in line with that. But think about this. PSV have as many Eredivisie titles in the past 3 seasons, as Ajax do top 2 finishes in the league. And this could have been the start of them restoring their dominance domestically, right? Of becoming the standard bearers once again for Dutch football. Instead, who knows where they go from here? They might lose their manager. Can they even pick themselves up and go again if they're able to bring back most of this team and the coaching staff and all of that? So much has gone wrong and it's been such a disaster. And they finally looked like they had this thing locked and that they could get back on track to being who we expect Ajax to be. And then it just falls apart in the most heartbreaking fashion possible, in historic fashion. It'll be really interesting to see how they bounce back next season and what this summer looks like for this club. So I just wanted to mention that because we really just haven't seen something like this before, and you just don't think about Ajax being this kind of club or associating this kind of thing with Ajax. And it just has... they just cannot catch a break over these past couple years. See if things change heading into next season. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.